Simon Danczuk is here. Simon, very good morning to you.
Good morning.
Good to see you. Welcome to the home of common sense. I was struck by a tweet you put out yesterday, which is why I wanted to talk to you.
Yeah.
Given the way that the police are investigating all manner of things, particularly in Manchester at the moment, you know, sending police officers around to talk to grannies about posts that they've made on Facebook. You had a pretty serious death threat. I mean, I know that sounds ridiculous, but what I would say a real death threat as opposed to some of the ones that you get on Twitter from a man. And tell us that nothing's happened about it, really?
Nothing's happened at all about it, in actual fact. And so, just by way of background, this is the by-election in Rochdale in February last year.
Yes.
The MP, Tony Lloyd, had died. There had to be a by-election. I was standing for reform.
Right.
Just 2 weeks into the campaign, I'm just checking my phone, and then on private messages on Facebook, which I'd obviously left open. I hadn't realised, I'm not very technological. I had 3 messages, two cursing me and saying that they'd like to assault me, and then a short video which people can see on my Twitter feed.
Right. I think we've got it, actually. I don't think we're going to play the audio of it, but I think you can see it. But you can't know. So
and it's threatening to put a bullet in my head and threatening to assault me and saying I don't care what the consequences are.
Right.
We took that very seriously. We reported it to the police immediately. They did make an arrest that evening, in actual fact. Yeah, absolutely.
So they were able to determine who it was?
Well, not least because he shows his address on the leaflet.
Right.
So he's taken offence at a leaflet that I've sent to him during the campaign because, if you recall, you had George Galloway very much campaigning on Gaza and I was campaigning on Rochdale.
Yes.
And this particular guy took offence to that and made the death threat. So they arrested him and then bailed him. Right. I mean, the interesting thing is, I said, is it possible? So in case he tries attacking me, could I have a picture of him?
Yes.
And the police said, well, he has rights as well, you know, we can't supply a picture of the perpetrator.
Right.
So it took them several months to investigate it. They had to download stuff off his phone, etc.
Right. And did they seek a sort of statement from you at any point?
Oh, yeah, no, absolutely. They took a statement on the day, a full statement, and passed a case file to the Crown Prosecution Service.
Right.
And I asked, did they think there should be a prosecution? And Greater Manchester Police said, yes, we do think there should be. But it's been with the CPS for several months now.
And so this would have been, what, last summer, I suppose, right?
No, February. Well, they passed the case over, So it's over a year since the threat was... This isn't the only threat I've ever had. I've been in politics 35 years. And I have to say, I had threats when I voted around the Syrian invasion issue. And I had death threats. I had funeral wreaths sent to my office some years ago when I was standing for as a parliamentary candidate. And these always emanate from one particular section of our society.
Yes.
And it's fair to say it's the Pakistani Muslim section of society where these death threats have come from. And I do have a view that some people in our society take a particular view of how to do politics.
Yes.
And it's not a very British way of doing politics.
And it's intimidatory, and we've seen a lot of that, haven't we, up north, particularly with the grooming gangs and the way that in some of these communities an awful lot of the politicians and the councillors are affiliated with some of the people who are taking part in the crime. And so they kind of go, oh, don't worry, we'll take care of it, it's our community, we'll look after it, and then nothing gets done.
No, absolutely. And it is about intimidation. This was part of a bigger intimidation campaign. It brought our election campaign to a halt, which is clearly what the intention is. So we couldn't go out and meet people. We had credit to Richard Tice, who was leader of Reform at the time, put security on it and everything else. But there were businesses that were supporting me that were phoned up and said, your business will be firebombed if you don't withdraw support. They stopped me from going to the hustings in Rochdale to speak on the platform. An intruder tried to get into the family home up there, so we had to move my family to a hotel. This is all within a short election campaign. And you know, Reform said to me in the general election, which was July, would you like to stand? And my wife had been that afraid of what had gone on in the February by-election, we made a decision not to stand. So the impact of these death threats can't be underestimated in actual fact.
Definitely. Well, it's obviously, aside from it being a threat to you and your family, which is horrendous, it's a pretty big threat to democracy as well. If this is how it's operating up there, because how else? I mean, who else is getting kind of targeted like this? You know, we will never know. And it's astonishing that the police wouldn't let you know who this protagonist was and what he looks like.
Yeah, absolutely. And why is?
I mean, did you ever feel intimidated physically when you were out and about?
Oh yeah, no, absolutely. So and I was much more cautious about who was coming up to me in the street and things like that. And you know, winning elections, I've been doing this 35 years, is about having contact with the electorate. And so if you withdraw that because of intimidation, then you're at a disadvantage. So the people doing the intimidation know exactly what they're out to achieve, and it's not acceptable. And why aren't the Crown Prosecution Service acting on it?
Well,
I mean,
that's another good question. I mean, why are they dragging their heels so much? I mean, we saw them dragging their heels in that Manchester airport story, didn't we? Where they took months and months and months to do something which was clearly visible on camera. I mean, in a similar case to yours in a way. Here's a guy, they know who it is. You know, obviously we're not able to give his name, but you know, they know who he is. There's evidence of him doing something which is illegal. You know, how is it difficult to make that a case? You know, if you're the Crown Prosecution Service, you're supposed to judge what the likelihood is of a conviction. Well, it seems pretty likely, doesn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. And we often talk about the politicisation of the police. What about, I think what we are seeing now is the politicisation of the Crown Prosecution Service. And it's getting worse, there's no doubt about that.
Do you think that they're taking their time because of the nature of the person's ethnicity?
Yes, and because of my politics. Because I'm a centre-right in politics, then I think it's not of interest to them.
Really?
If I'd been a Labour MP, I think they'd have reached a conclusion by now. I mean, all the evidence suggests that.
Right. Because look at all the times that we hear lessons are going to be learned. I mean, only recently with what happened in Southport and David Amos's family, who have been sort of, you know, agitating to try and get some answers out of the government, out of Prevent, you know, because David Amos's killer was in Prevent, was kind of, you know, everybody took their eye off the ball because they said he wasn't a danger to anybody, and it turned out that he was. I mean, you know, given all of those instances, you'd think that they would be hot on this topic.
Yeah, no, well, why haven't they learnt any lessons? Because their view on how democracy works is their view, and they're not supporting people like me. So it actually stopped me from standing for election. What sort of impact do you need in terms of democracy? And yet we're kowtowing to this. You know, it's the third time I've had death threats, and nothing ever gets done. It's not acceptable.
Have you tried to contact the CPS to find out where they are with it?
No, the Greater Manchester Police have always kept me informed, actually, on a relatively regular basis in terms of progress. The Crown Prosecution Service have never been in touch. But they'll see the messages that I'm putting out there. I mean, you know, it's quite blatant. I
mean, is there nobody you could speak to in Parliament? I mean, perhaps you can get one of your Reform MPs to ask a question. Yeah,
no, absolutely. And/or go and see my local Labour MP in Westminster and get them to put pressure on. But you shouldn't have to do this to get justice. This is a two-tier justice
Also, you're a pretty
system.
high-profile individual, right? Imagine if you weren't, and you were just somebody walking down the street who gets a death threat for some reason or other because of what they've done, or because they've maybe stood as a councillor for Reform, you know?
Oh, absolutely. And you didn't have the confidence to pursue it. A lot of this must just go away, and yet we help this sort of culture, which is very established, as you say, in these northern towns, where doing politics like this is acceptable. Well, it's completely unacceptable.
Yeah, it really is. Well, I mean, we may try and make some inquiries here and see what we can do, but I mean, it does seem absolutely extraordinary that it's taking over a year. I mean, who knows what this person does? I mean, who knows what business they're in or what they get up to? Who knows what damage they're doing to their community, regardless of who they're affecting, you know? Yeah,
well, exactly. They are damaging their community, aren't they? They're bringing a cloud over their community, and it is a small group of people within a particular community that are doing a lot of damage, and I think we have to challenge that much more radically than what we are.
And so, do you think that this will put you off of sort of the business of politics forever, then?
Oh, you know, yeah. Well, it's certainly affected my wife. She's very new to politics. She hasn't done politics like I have, and she was very disturbed by it, and has really been discouraged about doing politics. So I think twice about ever standing again. Yeah, absolutely.
That's a shocking state of affairs. Well, listen, thanks for coming in, Simon. Let's get a quick voice note, I think, if we've got time, from Dave on fly tipping.
Morning, Mike. Dave at Manchester. Fly tipping, it's no wonder it's on the increase. I've been using my people carrier vehicle to go to the tip for 8 years, unchallenged. Last week I went in and was told that I could only come once a month and I had to book it online. For whatever reason, I don't know. So I've never fly tipped before. but you can imagine why some people do. Great show.
I think we know what you're saying there, Dave. Yeah, absolutely right. This is a subject that we probably could talk about at length, Simon. But yeah, I mean, the fact that so many councils now are only collecting rubbish once a month, they're talking about doing it, or once a fortnight, and people are telling me that all of the tips that are around the country are starting to get really, really, ridiculous about the red tape and all the sort of certificates you have to sign.